Welcome and thank you for joining today's Business Edge briefing. For many years, North Bay Leadership Council has partnered with Dominican University of California's Institute for Leadership Studies. Together, we have welcomed business owners and organizational leaders to share business strategies and techniques for businesses to be resilient and competitive in the marketplace. We are grateful to Bank of Marin, our Business Edge briefing sponsor. For 30 years, Bank of Marin has been a leading business and community bank in the San Francisco Bay Area. We also like to thank our community partners, the San Rafael Chamber of Commerce, CEO Club of Marin, Marin Economic Forum, and our partners located on the Dominican campus, the U.S. Commercial Service and Marin Small Business Development Center, which is also known as SBDC. SBDC provides no-cost business advising with experts and assists small businesses with obtaining pandemic funding, HR support, e-commerce, and social media setup, pivoting strategies, and much more. In the past year, they have helped over 1,300 businesses in the Bay Area. Our speaker today is Kara Goldin, who is the founder and CEO of Hint Incorporated, best known for its award-winning Hint Water, the leading unsweetened flavored water. Kara has been named one of InStyle's Badass 50, Fast Company's most creative people in business, Fortune's most powerful woman entrepreneurs, Fortune's most innovative woman in food and drink, and EY Entrepreneur of the Year for Northern California. The Huffington Post lists her as one of 6 disruptors in business, alongside of Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg. Kara's first book is Undaunted, published by Harper Leadership and was released late last year in October. Today, she will be sharing stories from her life with observations that might change how you think about your own. Please join me in welcoming Kara Goldin. Welcome, Kara.
Hello. Hello. Thank you for the kind introduction. Very excited to be here.
We couldn't be more happy to have hear from you today. You've got so much to tell us, so please dig in.
Oh, thank you. So nice. Well, this is actually the second time that I've come. So hopefully all of you who were at our first chat had, this isn't going to be too much for me to repeat, but I'm the founder and CEO actually of a local company. It's called Hint Water. And I started the company just about almost 16 years ago now. I can't believe it, out of my own kitchen. And I was starting it actually as an idea that I had a problem in my life around my own health that I had recognized. It came after a career in tech, and I was really trying to take a couple of years off and figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And that's when I realized that I wasn't as healthy as I wanted to be. And I had gained a lot of weight over the course of my pregnancies. I had developed terrible adult acne that I had never even had as a teenager. And my energy levels went down. And that's when I started exercising more. And I was watching what I was eating and putting into my body. But I never really looked at what I was drinking. And I had been drinking diet soda, thinking that diet equated to health. And I fell into a trap that I think a lot of people fall into, which is picking out products that are healthy perception versus healthy reality. And when one day I just did a little test and started drinking plain water versus diet soda, that's when I realized that I knew that water was better for me, that it actually, I'd been hearing for years, drink 8 glasses of water, but I was never doing it because water to me was so darn boring. And so I started slicing up fruit and throwing it in the water for taste. And 2.5 weeks after just doing this little test at home, that's when my acne cleared up, my energy levels came back, and I lost over 20 pounds. And I thought, wait a minute, how did this happen? Why did this happen? And that's when my curiosity kicked into gear. And I thought, gosh, a lot of people don't know this about diet soda. Maybe I should try and get a product on the shelf at my local store. And that's what I did. And so we launched actually our product, which is fruit and water, no sweeteners, in San Francisco and also in Marin County in a little local store called Woodlands that you may be familiar with. And so 16 years later, we're the largest privately held non-alcoholic beverage in the country that doesn't have a relationship with Coke, Pepsi, or Dr. Pepper Snapple.
That is an amazing story. And you have such a rich ability to fill that story out in so many ways about how you had to go up against so many different challenges. And your new book is Undaunted. And certainly this was you living that undaunted life. Can tell us a little bit more about maybe some of those top challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, as I mentioned, I was a tech executive, so I didn't have experience in the beverage industry. And as I also mentioned, I had 3 kids actually at the time under the age of 4 when I decided to take a couple of years off and be a mom and spend some more time with my family. And then when I developed Hint, I was actually pregnant with my 4th child. So I was not the profile for an entrepreneur that maybe should be starting a company with 4 kids under the age of 6. But it was my curiosity and really my concern for consumers that I had figured something out that I believed that so many other people just didn't know, that marketing had really kind of taken over this concept for me of getting healthy, thinking that I was doing the right thing, but it just wasn't working for whatever reason. And then I really wanted to try and do this for other people as well. So a lot of people have said to me, gosh, did you always want to be an entrepreneur? Were you born this way? You worked for some incredible tech companies, including America Online and a little startup that was a Steve Jobs idea before that. And also prior to moving to the Bay Area, I worked in media in New York City, and I worked for Ted Turner, who started obviously CNN when it was kind of a late stage startup. So I'd worked for incredible entrepreneurs. And I think that the key thing that I learned from working for all these different people is that you'll never actually have all the answers, right? You've got to go out and try. You've got to go live undaunted. I've always been curious. I don't know that I was born this way, but more than anything, I think that the key to really being a successful entrepreneur, in addition to having an idea to solve a problem, is also how do you recruit people and bring in the right people in order to help you grow your organization? How do you continue to add on? One of the chapters I talk about that fly the airplane as you're building it. You'll never have the perfect product, right? That is very much a tech sort of thinking, though it's not a consumer products thinking. Instead, in tech, you always have upgrades and 2.0s, right? In consumer products, you launch a product and you wait, and you don't fix it until it's clearly broken. And I think that they're bringing that mindset into a new industry, into beverage. I didn't intend to do that. I started this company to help change other people's health, obviously change my own health. But little did I know that not having the correct experience was actually what would allow us to really innovate and stand apart.
That is such a fantastic story. And sidebar, when I was pregnant, I also had this huge burst of productivity, and there should be somebody studying what it's like when women are pregnant, how that productivity boost you get. It just you can accomplish amazing things. Somebody should look into that. One of the things that I'd like to go back a little further in your history is I read about you and your dad. And when you were looking to go work for that media company, and you had some hesitation, and your dad gave you great advice, and how important it is to have somebody like your dad in your corner saying it's okay to take risk, it's okay to fail. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. My father, actually, I consider him a frustrated entrepreneur because he developed a brand called Healthy Choice inside of a large company. And so as a small child, I remember him, testing, actually another local San Francisco individual helped him work on the Healthy Choice product, Julia Child. And so I would hear about these stories about developing healthier and better for you products, but inside of a large company, inside of Armor Food Company, which was then acquired by ConAgra. And he used to talk about how, large companies didn't want to take risks, and that, for him to go out and actually do what he wanted to do with the product and expand it, he really needed to leave the company and go and do something. And so I would, the inquisitive child that I was, I'd say, well, why wouldn't you do that? And he'd say, well, it's too hard. He would be excellent at giving the advice, but putting up his own walls as to why he couldn't do it. I later kind of connected those dots that he had 5 children and he wanted to put food on the table. He wanted to make sure that we went to college, all of these things, which of course are critically important. But when I was trying to decide what I was going to do, there's so many stories that I could share about some of the things that he said to me, but I was getting nervous about moving to New York City because I was an Arizona girl, grew up in Scottsdale, and I thought, okay, here I'm moving to New York City. I don't know anybody. And I am thinking about it. I've got a job, so that's a good start. But I was getting cold feet, and he said to me, "What's the worst that can happen?" And I said, well, a lot of things. I mean, something terrible could happen to me when I'm in New York. And he said, but seriously, what's the worst that can happen? You have a job, you go out there, you figure out how much your plane ticket is to come back to Phoenix. You're not going to have any furniture because you don't have, a job. And so quite yet, like you don't have a lot of savings in order to buy much. So don't, take a chance. Now's the time to take a chance. And I said, yeah, you're right. And sometimes you just need, whether it's your father or whether it's you telling yourself, like, why don't I just go do this? And I could always go do something else. Sometimes those are the voices, those are the words that you need in order to know that it's going to be okay and you can go and do other things. But sort of tagging on to a lot of what I have also learned as well is that so many people, and you can sort of attach this to age or maybe growing in an organization, the more senior you get, you come to a place where you don't want to take risks anymore, right? That you believe that when you're younger, maybe you go take risks, but even as you get more senior, you take risks, or you should be taking risks as well. And I remember when I was taking a break between tech and taking a little time off to be with my family, people said, how long are you going to take off? Because you shouldn't take that much time off. You won't be marketable anymore. And I said, but I did an incredible job in tech. I was, one of the youngest vice presidents at AOL and, one of the few females. And, I could probably still get a job. I mean, how long do you think is too long? And no one could answer that question. They would all give me different answers. And what I say to that now to people is, you've got to figure out things for yourself, right? And let's just say that I started Hint and it was a failure. I kept thinking in my head, I could always go back to tech. I could actually tell people, okay, here's what happened for the next couple of years. I went and started this crazy beverage company, and here's what I learned. And if people wouldn't hire me just because I went out and took a risk and maybe I failed, then it's their loss, right? And I kept saying this over and over again. And of course, you had your doubters. People would say, well, I don't know. I mean, you should still do it. But I still believe that. And I will say, just in in terms of me interviewing people today, I love hearing from people who can own their failures, who can own their challenging times. And because I think those people are, first of all, they own it, they've learned their lessons, and they will do better to move forward. And I'm a huge believer in that.
I totally agree. You learn so much more from your failures than your successes, and fail up, as the
Yeah,
saying is.
I agree.
So you have a very supportive father. You go and you take these risks. You go into a man-oriented business, which tech very much was when you were there. And then you go into a business that was dominated by big corporations. So again, showing to be undaunted. Talk a little bit about this latest thing where you say, okay, I've helped people by bringing them a healthy alternative to soda through Hint. Now I want to help people share by sharing what I've learned through my book. So tell a little bit about the motivation, and Lord knows how you found the time to write the book.
It's a great question. So I've been doing a ton of public speaking and also just meeting with customers throughout the US. And about 5 years ago, I was visiting cities where typically I didn't have friends there, right? So I'm sitting in, as I laugh, I'm sitting in my Holiday Inn Express with the waffle makers all looking the same and the doors all looking the same. And I'm thinking, I don't want to watch TV anymore. I can't sit in this room anymore. So I'll start writing. So I started journaling about 5 years ago. And typically after a keynote, there's a Q&A session and people would ask me questions, and I would think about those questions when I was journaling. They were prompts for me, and I would start writing as many stories as I could, as many answers to many of those prompts. And that's when I realized that it was getting pretty big. It was almost 600 pages. And a friend of mine, I know a few authors, and I reached out to a friend of mine and I said, I want to bind these 600 pages and put it into some sort of format that I can give out to entrepreneurs. I can give out to people who, might be thinking about a second career. And she said, "You mean publish a book?" And I said, "Oh, that's daunting. I mean, how would I do that? Why? I mean, I don't know anything about book publishing, and where would I find the time?" And she said, "You've got 600 pages. I mean, you've got a book here." And so it was, it took 5 years to really write it and ultimately, get it out there. But I think my purpose when I finally decided to actually do something as daunting as write a book was that I felt like I could help a lot more people. Oftentimes I was being hired, by colleges or by, businesses where I thought that the people that actually really need the help might not be in those colleges, might not be in organizations. They might be just trying to figure it out on their own. And that's a really lonely place. So if I could get it out to those people, maybe that would be really helpful. And I think the most surprising thing about the book is that I knew that it would be a huge help to other entrepreneurs or people wanting to be entrepreneurs or people who are, students, for example. I knew that it would, definitely hit home for those people. But the people that I'm most surprised about are actually the people who are CEOs of organizations, especially in the last year, who are sitting in the C-suite, who are, really recognizing that they may not have many, many more years to go do what they really want to do and go try something and maybe take risks. So I love the fact that those people are inspired by this book, that here's a person who was 35 years old when I decided to, make a change and get off the train at the success train that I was on and go, try. And I think that that's the most important thing, that these opportunities don't necessarily present themselves just by coming right in front of you. Sometimes you have to just think about exactly what it is that you are interested in too, that your friends, your colleagues may not be interested in the same things. When people heard I was starting a beverage company, they said, "Now, what in the world is she doing?" I mean, and for me, it was all about health because that's what was so important to me. So I love that it's helping a lot of people. And by the way, last thing, it's not just women that are reaching out to me. Many men don't want to look foolish, right? That's why they don't take risks. And so, and especially the more senior you get. So it is not based on, gender, right? It's just everybody fears looking stupid, failing, having challenges, too hard, all of these things. But you have to get that mindset really and bring that to the table. Otherwise, you're never going to go out and create change.
Such great points, and I'm wondering. I'm glad to hear that the men were also excited about the book, but I'm also wondering, was there a bigger response maybe from people in the tech industry? Because I mean, the pressure of being in the tech industry and, and that, like, the quarterly reviews, not annual reviews, and that need to keep creating the next level of product. I would think a lot of them get very burned out, and we're really encouraged by your story.
Well, it's interesting. Our part one of the stories in the book is how we grew in the tech industry. We became the largest beverage in the tech industry. It came, shortly after we launched Hint. I was actually getting recruited by Google to come and join them. And this gentleman who's a friend of mine, Omid Kordasani, who used to be at Netscape with my husband, was working at Google, was one of the first employees, and he had reached out to me and said, I'd really love to recruit you. And I shared with him my idea and my passion. And he, is the first one to admit that he thought it was a little crazy, but he said, by the way, we just hired people, chefs, to come and cater for our employees. And I don't think we have a drink yet. So you should talk to this guy, Charlie, which I did. And that's how really Hint grew in all of these tech offices. What I think is still so funny 16 years later is many tech executives hear my story. Many people just drink Hint and they like the taste of it, but they'll hear my story that I was a tech executive. And I've had people from Apple and Google and Facebook. I'm like, what in the world are you doing, thinking about leaving these companies? And but again, your own passion, your own interests, I think it really boils down to being a lifelong learner and really wanting to challenge yourself in some way. And I think that was the fascination for me about the beverage industry, was that I just couldn't believe, first of all, the games that went on in the industry, that as a tech executive, I had no idea until I was actually in it. But in addition to that, just, how things are made, all of these things, and actually coming from the outside and going into the beverage industry, not only was it satisfying my curiosity, but I felt like I could actually make a lot of changes in, the way we do things. And ultimately, I think it's interesting that I remember it was probably 13 years ago now, I started getting phone calls from press about mission driven and purpose driven companies. And that's why we launched Hint in the first place. So these press were reaching out to us saying, I think about you a lot and sort of what you're doing. And that hasn't changed. I mean, our purpose really has always been that. And, we launched other products outside of water in the sunscreen industry. And during the pandemic, we launched a hand sanitizer. And it really boils down to helping the customer stay healthy. And we won't do 2,000 products, but we'll do products that really have purpose, that create value for the consumer, and really just teach the rest of those industries to do better. Our sunscreen, if you haven't tried our sunscreen, is amazing. And you can get it on our website at drinkhint.com, but also on Amazon, any of our products. So it's very, very, very exciting.
Well, and health really is a thread throughout everything you're doing, and with the bigger thread being, let's try and help people, and so I love the idea on the sunscreen is you created it because you couldn't find one that didn't have the chemicals in it that you knew were bad for health. And the same thing with the hint water. You needed to get the sugar out and you couldn't find something that was doing that. So that is what is, I think, one of the most fascinating things about you. And the subtitle of your book is Overcoming Doubts and Doubters. So here you
Exactly.
have these great ideas. And as you mentioned earlier, there's so many people that want to, say, put rain on your parade here and say, well, how do you know that could work? Or is that, are you sure you want to take this risk? So there's two areas that I'd like you to address. One is, you've talked a lot about overcoming self-doubt, but how do you do it to sort of your support network? How do you get your support network to get on board? And you talked a little bit earlier about, creating hint. And I know that in reading some of your other interviews, your husband was one you had to convince, and you probably have others. And then the second part of that is the people in your company, the people you're leading. How do you overcome their doubts and have them get on board with taking those risks with you?
Well, I think first of all, I'll answer the second question first. I think that when you're hiring people, you hire people who really have passion and interest for what you're doing. So I had thought that since I didn't have industry experience, everybody said, you've got to get these people from the soda industry to come and, work on your business because they'll help you figure this stuff out. The reality is that when you're inside of a large company, you're learning how to do the same thing over and over and over again. Innovation, even though some of these large companies have innovation is not really recognized as valuable, right? That they have one, but it's not the best place to be inside of a company, right? And especially if you're a public company, I mean, you're answering to Wall Street, it's a whole different situation. And so maybe I kind of knew that just by being inside of large companies and sometimes starting small and as they got larger. But what I learned is that passion really, really should be more valued, and interest should be more valued, and curiosity and ability to ask questions and ability to not believe that you're perfect, right? And how do we constantly focus on improving? That is way more valuable in any of our employees versus having lots and lots of experience. And then, second, I think that the doubters piece is you're always going to have doubts, right? You're always going to question things when things are not known, right? That's where you're going to sit there and say, I don't know if it's going to work or not. But the most important thing is figuring out how do you move forward. And yes, my husband was my original doubter. He, rolled up his sleeves and got in and sort of saw the impact that potentially getting people to try this product and enjoy this product, hint, the unsweetened flavored water, could actually help people get off of these diet sweeteners, whether it was Diet Coke or at that time, vitamin water was such a huge one as well, and really help people to really come to this side where they probably thought water was super boring as well. And finally, one of the stories that I share in the book that everyone seems to enjoy. It was not an enjoyable time for me when I was in it, I'll say, but it was about a year into building Hint, and that's when I really had a lot of doubts that I couldn't get through. And I was thinking, I don't know if this is going to work. Maybe I do need to go out and reach out to one of those senior executives at Coca-Cola. And one of my friends knew somebody pretty senior at Coke. And I ended up having a phone call with this gentleman. And about 15 minutes into the phone conversation, that's when he interrupted me and said, "Sweetie, Americans love sweet. This product isn't going anywhere." And I thought, wait, did he just call me sweetie? What just happened here? I've never been called sweetie in my life. And people have asked me, why didn't you hang up the phone on him? Why didn't you say, excuse me? Or I don't know why I didn't. I was just so shocked. And that's when I listened very closely, maybe listened to see if he would say something else somewhat obnoxious or dismissive. But instead, he went on to explain the strategy that they had, which was to get their drink down to 0 calories. At the time, diet drinks were 10 calories. And he never said the word health. in his description. And instead, what I was hearing was, as long as we get the product to 0 calories, then we'll be able to trick the consumer into believing that it's healthier. And I thought, wow, that's shocking and amazing. And when I hung up the phone with him, I think he probably thought I was going to just quit, which I had as an option. But then I thought, why am I so concerned about his validation when he is not on the same page as me, the same river as me? And so that doubter, when really, really clarified for me why I really shouldn't be listening to him. And I think that that's such an important lesson when, you've got your doubters. You're always going to have your doubters out there. Family is probably the worst, because they doubt just because they don't want you to take risk, right? My family didn't want me to change jobs, change careers. Everything was going fine, but I knew I needed to go do that for myself. And so I think that your biggest enemy is really yourself, and your ability to listen and really just be aware about and think about the perspective of the doubters and where they're coming from is so important.
I agree so much. I wonder, as a mother, how you're able to sort of instill those values that we don't want our kids to take risk, but we know they should and need to. And it's like, how do you do that with your own kids to help them have that kind of strength that you've developed?
Yeah, a really, really important point. So like so many other parents, as I'm building the company, you're questioning, gosh, should I really be doing this? I was starting to do traveling, and what I realized is that if you're happy, if you've got purpose for doing what you do every single day, that shows, right? I realized how frustrated my dad was in sort of his situation, and kids in the reverse know when their parents really enjoy what they do. And I think actually doing something that I love every single day. My husband, I recruited him to be our chief operating officer, and my kids realize that we have kind of a abnormal parents working together. That doesn't happen as much anymore. Parents who are really trying to do something that they feel has mission and purpose. And as one mother said to me when my daughter, who's in college now, was younger, she was driving her somewhere, and she said, "Oh, where is your mom traveling to?" And she said, "Oh, she's taking on the soda industry. I don't know where she is today." And so that kind of stuff, it wears off. Kids do watch, kids do listen, and I think that really is something that I've learned as well.
That's fantastic. So, talk a little bit more. I know that everybody always wants to try and understand work-life balance, and I think you have a good philosophy about that. So share a little bit about how you think about work-life balance.
Yeah, I've always been a little challenged with the work-life balance, and I touched on this a minute ago a bit, but I think that if you enjoy what you do and you're always kind of checking in with yourself to make sure that you're enjoying what you do, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have challenges along the way. Sure, you're going to, have bad days, but know that those bad days can turn into good, and showing and sharing and owning kind of those challenges, I think really creates kind of the proper environment for you to have some kind of balance. I think it's where I think that we've gone wrong to some extent is having this separation and having so much stress on make sure to separate. My kids actually want to know what's going on. We talked about clean water. My kids are constantly asking me about this, and they'll read stuff and they'll come back and talk to me about it. Again, when you can bring your family into parts, not everything, but to see why you're enjoying what you're doing, because you're learning, because you're interested, because you're taking some risks, that actually helps them to develop as humans as well.
That's good. Well, I know what you said is people shouldn't expect that you can always have a balance. Like every day you're going to be able to stop work and go home for so many hours, that it's got to be flexible. And I thought
And
that was
And especially in, today's environment where so many people are working from home, right? And I think that it's very difficult to separate things out. But again, use your own EQ to try and figure out when the timing is right. And I'll have days when my kids will say, you know what, I can't listen anymore, and that's fair, right? They'll talk to me about, some game, and I'll say, I can't listen to this anymore, right? And so again, I think that creates balance, actually being able to communicate and keep that dialogue open. I will say that I think people always ask, are your kids, I have 3 in college and 1 in high school, and people say, are your kids going to be entrepreneurs? And I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine that they won't do something that has passion. I think more than anything, they raise their hand and they question, and they've taught me a lot about, they're Gen Zers. I have 4 Gen Zers, all different, that are coming into the workplace. The majority of my company is millennials. I'm a Gen Xer. I've learned so much from them, and I'll talk to them and create dialogue. So again, it's not just about learning from me and having me being balanced. It's about balancing them as well and letting them be curious and inquisitive, and all of that, I think, is critical.
And now you just intrigued me. So I guess we could consider this a family-owned business, hint. And in
Yes.
family-owned businesses, there's their own challenges. And one of the biggest ones is succession. Do you see maybe one of your kids following in your footsteps and taking over the company when you're ready to move on?
Possible. I think we've set up Hint to basically be a standalone business, but we also have investors in the company too. So we've had, a crazy year, but an incredible year. We've had our direct to consumer business has tripled. Our overall sales have been up over 50%. I mean, it's been a crazy, incredible year. But more than anything, I want them to do something that they're passionate about. And they've interned at different points along the way. And, I think it's possible, but I certainly don't want to put any pressure on them to do it either. But I think that there's a lot of places inside of the company, whether they decide to do something with Hint or decide to do something with somebody else, where they can learn. And my son, for example, is working on innovation this summer. He's just finishing his freshman year in college, and he's working on supply chain and is very interested in some of the stuff we've done around automating supply chain and AI. And so I don't know where he goes with that, but I think the fact that he's got passion and interest and he wants to learn, I think is really, really critical.
That's exciting. So let's talk a little bit about this past year, because there's a military term that I've sort of been using as the shorthand. It's called VUCA, and it's VUCA. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And managing through that time is something that is absolutely fascinating to me. And it really ties into what you've done your whole career. And especially in this last year, you just talked about how you were able to make some switches to adapt to the changing circumstances, to the VUCA of our times. Do you see anything more coming out of this time of change and the need to be agile that maybe is going to help drive you in some other directions, or new products? What have there been lessons learned from this year that you're taking forward?
I think always, being a little bit paranoid in running a business is a good thing. I mean, it's one, thing I'll share that is not in the book, obviously, because the manuscript was turned in prior to the pandemic, which I consider March in the US being, kind of the month that a lot of people, learned a lot about themselves and also about their business. We had really focused on automating our supply chain as much as possible, primarily because we don't use preservatives in our product. And so we had been really focused for the last 4 years in making sure that we were actually getting people out of the room when we fill the bottle. So we use our fruit extracts and we put it into the bottle. And, we'd always been concerned with people, with humans in the room, that if somebody sneezed, right, they don't even have to have a fever. They sneeze, there's bacteria, right, that gets into a product. And the beverage industry told us, don't worry about it. It's just, it's just a sneeze. I mean, they won't come into work if they're sick, or, they won't have allergies. And again, we just questioned a lot of things. That's what we were, maybe a little paranoid. And by the end of 2019, we had gotten our supply chain down to our fill rooms, down to 0 people in the room. We primarily did that not only because we thought it was healthier and better, and we wouldn't have any potential contamination in our product that doesn't have preservatives in it, but also because we wanted to scale. We were going into Aldi and Walmart and Sam's Club, some giant accounts this year. And when the pandemic hit, that's when it was very, very clear that we were not having any interruptions in our supply chain, because we had really done it right. I mean, we were unlike some other food and beverage companies. When the FDA came in and were looking at the factories, what they had seen was that we had done so much automation as compared to other companies. We were able to continue running our lines. And so, again, I think setting up your business to really, almost be paranoid and doing it right is never a bad thing. And my biggest advice that I've learned just through this pandemic is looking back at those challenging times. Maybe, you didn't have your factory as automated as possible. Use this time to really learn from those things and have goals, right? That doesn't mean you have to do something tomorrow, but do something. What are the lessons from those things, and figure out a couple of steps that you can start to look into automating your factory. Try and figure out, if we would have done that, things would have been a lot easier. And so I think that lessons are always there, especially during times of, challenging times or pandemics or failures, however you want to look at them. It's your responsibility to take a few steps to actually say, what if we would things have been better?
You have a remarkable sense of timing on when you do things. It's just amazing. I want to get into you're talking about water and the need to protect water and for it to be healthy, because it is such an essential part of life. I know you're an activist around clean water, and you've done a lot to try and help clean up drinking water, especially. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I try. I mean, I've learned quite a bit about water over the last 16 years. It's funny because I never really thought that I would, be in Washington really talking about clean water. But again, having been in many plants and dealing with our own water and the filtration systems that we put in place in order to put fruit in with no preservatives, I've learned quite a bit about water. And what I've learned is that water really varies by state, and that there are different regulations by state. And even by state, the some of the restrictions that I've seen and regulations that I've seen around water are frankly kind of shocking. So, for example, in California, when we're looking at drinking fountains, that we test for lead in drinking fountains, but no matter how big the school is, the schools are only required to turn in 5 tests. And in fact, the state doesn't actually want to see more than 5 tests. So if you have, let's say, a high school with 3,000 students, pretty giant high school, and you probably have a lot of drinking fountains, and you're not even required, by the way, to have the water from the drinking fountain that is maybe washing the lettuce that is going on the school trays. That is crazy, right? That could be an entirely different lead levels and other things that we don't necessarily measure in those areas. And so a lot of what I've been discussing is actually, hopefully going to be part of Biden's infrastructure program. Hopefully that will be in effect. But again, I think that doesn't stop us from calling attention, because probably a lot of it will get cut back. And there's other things besides lead. I mean, PFAS is such a hot issue right now. I mean,
What is that?
PFAS is, I can't remember what it stands for, but it's PFAS. And unfortunately, in California, the red stuff from our wildfires that we're dumping down over the last, so that contains PFAS. So when PFAS hits the ground to get the fires out, what ends up happening to the PFAS? It goes into the ground. And so does it go into the water supply? So in California, as an example, what is we are a huge agriculture state. So we have crops, we have wine. And so what happens to the PFAS? And I know from dealing with our product that you actually have to, it doesn't just come out with filtration systems. You actually have to do higher levels, pasteurize in order to get those out. And nobody's doing that, right? And so unfortunately, I think the PFAS, not just in California, but throughout the US, like 90% of people have PFAS in their bloodstream. And PFAS is considered by the National Institute of Health and also the Center for Disease Control as a known carcinogen. Now, at what level is PFAS going to turn into cancer? Hard to say, right? We know that in places like Native American lands throughout the US, the PFAS levels are off the chart and there's no regulation. So we hear about, on certain reservations, there's no water. Like in Arizona, they've shut off the water supply because the water is so contaminated. So it's very, very scary what's going on. And I think, again, we need better infrastructure. We need national regulations. The Environmental Protection Agency has really gone backwards versus forward in allowing, some of the things to just go by. So I'm hoping that just by being a voice and again, I'm running a for-profit company at Hint. It's not, this is a side hustle for me. This is not my main job. But what I'm also trying to emphasize to people is that, you don't have to be in a nonprofit to go out and make change, that actually my voice and my knowledge can actually help consumers, not just by giving them a great product like Hint, but also try and create change. It should be a basic human right worldwide to have access to clean water. I can't necessarily do anything outside of the US, but I believe I can actually create and educate people in the US.
I wholeheartedly agree that we need business leaders to lead, and
Yeah.
that you have the knowledge and the resources that government doesn't have. And that is so important for us to be able to tap into, and you're the real problem solvers.
Thank you.
You've been doing that, and we need you. So thank you so much for all that you're doing around getting our water clean. And my goodness, when you think about our kids in schools being exposed to contaminated water, that's not what we send our kids to school for.
Absolutely.
So are you
not.
worried now that we're in a drought? Does that affect your business and your access to water?
Sure. Well, we're actually all over the country, and so we do a lot of filtration and reverse osmosis in the water. And so, we're not just taking water out of California. We actually have plants all over the U.S. And so there's a lot of different technology too that is coming out around using salt water, for example, and filtrating that properly. So I'm definitely personally concerned in Marin County. So just seeing my my local reservoir, Phoenix Lake, almost dry. So obviously, I think that we need to figure out how to recreate water and use more tools. So And I know that some of the technology that's out there can actually do that. But I think that it's something that we're very, very conscious and aware of.
Well, as we couldn't imagine less from you. Talk a little bit as we get near the end, how you keep your own batteries recharged. How do you stay motivated?
Yeah, well, I think getting outside and enjoying nature, enjoying Marin County is definitely so key for me. I start every day hiking, 3 to 5 miles a day with typically my husband and my two Labradors. So, we live in an incredible place in Marin County that allows us to do that. So I feel very fortunate.
And so I can't imagine you don't have more ideas that you wish to bring to fruition. Do you have anything that you're working on now, your next challenge, your next idea that you're want to
Oh,
talk about? Next book? Have you
I
shown a picture of your book, by the way? I don't think you held it
I
up.
I did. Well, here it is again. And so yeah, so hopefully everybody will get a chance to read it or listen to it. I also did the audio version on Audible myself. I read the book, so you can if my voice isn't too irritating to you, you can hear me read it as well. And many people have said that they really feel like they're sitting there and chatting with me through all of this. But I think more than anything, just continuing to service the consumer. And like I said, I wrote this book because I really believed it could help a lot of people get unstuck, and also help people maybe feel less lonely as well. Because I was talking to an entrepreneur yesterday in a totally different industry who was sharing with me that, she just felt very sad because she was trying to raise money, and it's hard, right? And it's something that, especially if you're dealing with your friends and your family who don't know uh, what you're doing or what you're up against, right? And going out and raising funding. I mean, the typical response is, well, maybe you shouldn't do it anymore. Maybe you should go back to tech, right? I've heard it before, and it's not helpful, right? Instead, you need to figure out where you can find your communities that are going to help you push forward and enjoy the ride.
So I know in another interview I saw that you talked about your philosophy. So if you were to say to that entrepreneur you talked to yesterday, or any other entrepreneur, maybe 3 tips on what they need to sort of have mentally or if
Yeah.
business wise, what would you tell them that they should be doing?
I think it's great to have goals, but it's critical to not allow those goals to get too daunting where you can't move forward. And second, there's a million ideas out there, and it's not just about having a great idea; it's about being able to execute. And the best way to be able to execute, and I guess this is number 3, is to be able to really have the right team and have people that believe in what you're doing, and people who are going to help you and support you to move forward. So all of this cannot be done. You cannot build a successful company if you do not have team and people. People are what matter.
And so do you do something to help when you talked earlier about you identify the people with passion? How do you grow them? Do you have techniques in your own company on how you grow them? You have to be able to channel that passion and give it the skills to do what you need it to do. Do you have a method for that?
Well, I think there's, one of the most important things that maybe is a little different in our organization, and frankly, it's probably something that I've learned through my journey, is that you hire people with passion, and then they start to do, the job, and they do the job correct. And then as you scale, you hire more people and to help them, right? To so that they're not overwhelmed, so that they can do more, however you want to look at it. I think that the biggest challenge for managers today is that they typically will hire people who can do the job versus people that know something that they don't, that can help them stay engaged, right? Boredom comes when your whole responsibility as, a manager at any level is just to mentor and manage. Mentoring and managing is fine, but you also have to remain a little bit selfish to want to be learning too. So I always ask my managers when they're hiring people, the tendency is to hire people who can do a task. The better thing to do is to hire people who know something that you don't. Now, think about this, right? When you're growing in an organization, you've done an incredible job already, and you're hiring more people on because the role is getting bigger, or the company is getting bigger, and your manager's telling you, hire somebody that knows more than you, who's smarter. However, you're sort of formulating in your head. It's a little scary, right? You're thinking, why would I hire somebody who knows more than me? Then they're gonna, they're gonna overstep me. I'm gonna be out of a job. But what I say to managers is, if you believe you've done an incredible job, and we certainly do, then you should actually want to continue learning. And you have to hire people who you're not only going to learn from, but who are also going to alleviate some of your time to allow you to go and keep learning in an organization. That's how you keep engagement in an organization.
And that sort of takes us back to Undaunted, because really the premise is about self-power. And
Totally.
so we've got like 1 minute left. So just sort of wrap up, like, what do you want to leave people with on the idea that how important self-power is?
I think self-power and being undaunted is scary, right? And I think that you're always going to have fears, and you're always going to, the tendency will be to not allow yourself to move forward because you're smart and you're going to come up with ideas as to not want to do it. But you have to tell yourself that this is a choice. This is a conscious decision. And in order to really be who you want to be and who you're supposed to be on this journey, that you have to make a conscious decision to live undaunted.
Kara Goldin, thank you so much. We have learned so much today. This has been a tremendous joy to be able to have a conversation with you and learn from you. And we can't wait to see what else you do. You've got so much more to give back to the community and keep us all healthy. We really appreciate you giving us so generously of your time today.
Thank you.
I also want to thank our partner, Dr. Denise Lucy, the head of the Institute for Leadership Studies at Dominican. Denise, it's always a great pleasure to be able to produce these briefings with you. And thank you to our program sponsor, the Bank of Marin. We have an event coming up on May 5th at 6 p.m. The Leadership Lecture Series is presented by Dominican in partnership with Book Passage, and they're going to be hosting the Emmy and Golden Globe award-winning actress Sharon Stone in conversation with Ellie Schaefer, who served as a special assistant to President Barack Obama, who director of the White House Visitors Office in Washington. And Stone's going to discuss her new book, The Beauty of Living Twice. And you can register to attend that event at Book Passage or at dominican.extendedsession.com. Please stay tuned for future programming announcements. And we really thank you for joining us today. We look forward to having you attend future briefings. Hope you go and have a great day today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.